Franchini, Podcast Extreme, the only Centurions podcast so far, at least that we know about. We were really happy that you tuned in last week for our first episode, and it really encouraged Mark and I to continue and hopefully, do a habit of this. And we also really appreciate those of you that liked our Facebook page, and our future plans include putting these on YouTube as well, so that you will be able to, use your site of choice to listen to this. And we'll also be able to put episodes on Google Podcasts. So there'll be a bunch of ways to reach us. And today, we are going to discuss the exo frames and the more precisely the assault weapon systems. But first, hey Mark, how's it going over there?
Oh, it's going very well, Yuri. Thanks for asking. I hope things are going okay with you too. And so I am going to make an attempt to improve my performance for this podcast. Last week, when I listened back to it, all I could hear is myself going, all the time and interrupting Yuri. And hopefully I will be able to reduce that as we continue doing this podcast.
No, you were absolutely. I really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully we can extend these discussions to a third or a fourth person as well, because we discussed with Mark that hopefully in the near future. Don't cue the theme song again, please. In the near future, we'll have some friends from the Facebook group, or even interview guests. Mark thankfully knows some of the creators of the original show, and will reach out to voice actors and artists. Thankfully, the IMDb profile of the show has a lot of information, so that will be something that will be coming up in the future. And today, before we start recording, Mark also mentioned again that we are going to do episode reviews. But for that to happen, we'll try to find a way for most of you to have the option to watch these episodes. Hopefully, in a legal way, but we'd like to share the story, but also discuss and have this like an open discussion with you guys in the comments, wherever you feel like commenting. But no further introduction is needed now. Mark, let's start with the assault weapon systems. So do you have any intro to give our audience about that?
Okay, the assault weapon systems were the things that made the Centurions toy line unique, and they are definitely the heart of the franchise. Okay, the assault weapon systems are these basically mini vehicles that attach to the exo frames, which are the power suits with the holes in them worn by each Centurion team member. And according to the writer's guide, they give each member the power of 1,000 men, which is, I guess, how they worked in the Centurions' name. Now, the original explanation for that was that a working title for the franchise was 21st Centurions, but they dropped the 21st. Anyway, so the assault weapon systems are these mini vehicles that are key to land, air, and sea for the three team members, and they allow each one to battle Doc Terror's Doom drones and whatever other evil forces they have to fight with various missile launchers and lasers and radar scanners and things like that. And each of the ones that was manufactured for the toy line has moving parts that are activated by the chest unit inside of the hero figures. So you could just turn a knob or press a button or manipulate the weapon system manually, or use the power pack when that came out, and activate the systems and watch the action features do their thing. You could launch missiles, make various accessories rotate or pulsate, and in universe, as I said, they were used to fight Doc Terror's evil forces with a variety of weaponry.
Right, right. One thing before we move into into the field of the weapon systems themselves, one key element that I wouldn't say splits the the fans, but for some fans it's an important feature. For other fans, it's not an important feature. Let's talk about the shaft.
Oh, you mean the chest mechanism inside the figure?
Yes. So well, that also made the figures special. You mentioned that the inside mechanism helped work some of the weapons on the figures. But like, what's your take on that's because not many other figures had this function. The GI Joe figures had the I think it's called the O-ring that kind of held the figure together, but that didn't really have any toy gimmick function other than it allowed the figure to be extremely posable. So why is the shaft different?
Well, because the hero figures interact with the assault weapon systems, and that was a feature that no toy line has had before, and probably not since. Even franchises that are sort of similar, like Exo Squad, where they have the big mecha, you just have this little figure that plugs into the mecha. In Centurions, the figure and the mecha become one. And so, Centurions was built around two gimmicks. The first one was the mechanical motion, which involved the hero figures and the assault weapon systems working together, and the villain figures had their own version of that with interchangeability, and that Doc Terror, Hacker, and the Doom drones could all exchange parts with each other. And so the toy line was built around those two gimmicks. I think they are the heart of the line, the heart of the franchise. It's not something like, say, the hologram stickers from Visionaries, which, yeah, they're important. But on the other hand, if you just took them and replaced them with regular stickers, I personally wouldn't mind that much. Or it would be like having Transformers figures that didn't transform, which I guess that some of those actually
It happened.
Yeah, I guess it did. Yeah, I'm not.
Yes, the Action Masters.
Yeah, see, I am not as big on Transformers as I am on Centurions, but obviously the fact that most of the figures you can play with them as a robot or as a vehicle, that gives you two levels of play value, and that's why Transformers has been so enduringly successful.
Very true, and it's interesting to think whether it would have been an option to do this or to use this mechanism and to produce it, cost efficiently, if the figures would have been, GI Joe size, like smaller, like whether that would have been an option or not, or those figures would have been too small for this mechanism to work without to be making the figures and the weapon system too fragile.
Well, I am no physicist or inventor, but yeah, I think that would have been a problem. I'd have to ask some of the Kenner people about that, but yes, the Centurions figures were unusually large for their time. A powerful 7.5 inches tall, said the Kenner catalogs. Now, they were about the same size as the Thundercats figures that were popular then, and the Galaxy Rangers figures, which were not that popular and only came out in Europe. But my point is that I wouldn't be surprised if Kenner decided that this was the smallest possible figure that they could fit the mechanism inside.
Right. That's a good point. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the assault weapon systems. Now, maybe focusing on one specific character might be too boring if he wasn't your favorite. So, but we'll kind of do a deep dive on these characters. And Mark, by the way, who was your favorite? Who would you prefer to talk about from the characters?
Well, the way I was planning it is I was going to discuss the three characters in the order they are introduced in the title sequence, which is Max Ray, Brilliant Sea Operations Commander; Jake Rockwell, Rugged Land Operations Specialist; Ace McCloud, Daring Air Operations Expert.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll go ahead and start with Max, and maybe I'll tag in and cover Jake. So yeah, let's start with Max then.
Okay, now if you've collected Centurions, you know that each figure was actually packaged with little mini assault weapon systems, and to quote a famous garbage bag commercials, the little systems were wimpy, 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 while the bigger systems were hefty, hefty, hefty. But it was an interesting decision in that it allowed the child purchasing this thing to get their play value with a figure and an assault weapon systems right from the beginning. Now, the one that Max came with was Cruiser. And I should note before I start this that I wrote an article about the toys for this little fanzine called Action Figure Collector in 1994. So both of you who read that magazine might remember some of these phrases I'm using because, okay, let's face it, I'm going to be doing some direct quotes because I already did my research back in 1994. Why do I have to do it again now? So thank you, 1994 me.
So Mark, you're officially plagiarizing yourself.
Yeah, and if I can figure out a way to sue myself, I'll be doing that.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
Okay, so Cruiser was Max's basic assault weapon system. It came with a diving helmet, an air pack unit, a rotating keel fin / radar repulsor, a hydro missile with spring-fired launcher, a repulsor cannon, and 2 hydro thrusters. And of course, any of these items could be repositioned on the figure any way a child wanted. And that, I think, is one of the geniuses of the Centurions line, and one of the things that has kept me coming back to it, that it basically made you an amateur toy designer because you could recombine the assault weapon systems within themselves and with other weapon systems any way you wanted. If you wanted to put the hydro thrusters on Max's legs, you could do that. If you wanted to put them on his arms, you could do that. If you wanted to put them on his shoulders, well, if you had the room, you could do that. If you wanted to put them in the chest drive and spin them around, you could do that. And, of course, you had to keep the Max's helmet because that was used with all the other weapon systems that Max had. Now, a couple of the weapon systems came with their own helmets, but I don't think Max had any of those. So you basically had to buy the basic figure to get the helmet, and so you had to hang on and make sure that it wasn't mangled by the vacuum cleaner or that your siblings didn't lose it or something.
Right, and each figure, I think, from the basic assortment had one weapon system where there was something going on with the helmet. For Max, Depth Charger, which we'll discuss later, didn't have space for a helmet and didn't use a helmet. Jake had
although you could have him wearing the helmet while using Depth Charger if you wanted, although he didn't really need it.
Right. Oh yeah. Right. And so Jake had Hornet, which we'll also discuss, which didn't use the helmet, and Ace had Orbital Interceptor, where we'll also discuss, where he had a separate helmet. But from the basic assortment, basically, or the first wave, essentially only Ace had the chance to have a helmet, even if you didn't want to use the basic helmet that came with the default small weapon system. So yeah, you were discussing with Cruiser. I wanted to add one thing, is that when you look at it from a military perspective, since Cruiser was Max's smallest and lightest weapon system, it was basically one of those, like it was kind of like a marine type infantry gear, where he had a gun on his arm that he could use. He had one missile that he could fire, basically. So that kind of served as as a backup plan if Doctor sent heavier drones or large groups of drones. But it was basically this in the story, this this weapon system was given to Max if he just needed to be versatile, because if he had something too heavy, then he would be limited if the action continued on outside water because with Cruiser, he had two jets on his legs, which he could use even on land to gain small boosts, kind of like a mini jetpack or jet jump boost. So it was kind of his ideal weapon system to fight on land as well, as opposed to being confined to the water.
Yeah, those are all good points. I would also like to point out that if Awesome Auger had been released, it would have had its own helmet, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Oh, Awesome Auger, right. That's a good point. I wondered, but did Max ever have any concepts of an original helmet, or he was the only one who would have never gotten one?
Not that I'm aware of. If the line had continued, who knows what Kenner would have come up with, but no. As far as I know, we only had the one helmet.
Gotcha. Okay, let's move on to your choice of Tidal Blast or Depth Charger.
We'll go with Tidal Blast next because that was an intermediate system. Oh, and also something else I should point out while I'm thinking of it is that the way the TV episodes are structured, almost always they began with the lighter assault weapon systems and moved their way up to the characters using the intermediate or heavy assault weapon systems in the second or third acts of the episode.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it kind of it's a really good point because it shows that no, it's not just like, oh, give me a big gun and let me shoot whatever comes my way, but it was like, okay, give me more a lighter load or a lighter weapon system that I can explore the threat, and then whatever I need I will have either I would switch to those, or I would request a combination of my weapon system. So basically what kids would have done as they were playing and pretending to be these characters and exchanging guns and missile launchers and accessories, the characters were actually doing that in the show as they encounter different types of threats, even and we'll discuss this again later on, even using another Centurion's weapon systems or combining two Centurion's weapon systems. But let's continue with Tidal Blast.
Okay, and another thing I thought of is that the use of various levels of assault weapon systems made sense from a marketing standpoint, because you got the basic ones packaged with the figures, you got the intermediate ones that don't cost as much, and then you have the heavy, expensive ones. And so maybe you can't afford Depth Charger this week, so you buy Tidal Blast instead, something like that.
Right, but it's also interesting that you had to buy the light one. You had to buy the cheapest one. I don't know if it was the cheapest or not, but you had to buy the lightest one to have a Centurion to fit into the larger one. So everyone probably had, the basic assortment, Max, Ace, and Jake. But whether what the secondary, or if someone had the secondary, assault weapon system, was based on parents' budget or how much the child was into this line, but everyone probably had the basic assortment. Otherwise they wouldn't have had a figure to put into the heavier one.
Yeah, it was kind of like Disneyland. All the price of admission got you was inside the park. You still had to pay separately to go on the rides.
Right. And unfortunately the weapon systems weren't entirely compatible with Dog Terror or Hacker. So and I don't know, I wasn't, I was born in '86, so I wasn't part of this, of this era as a kid necessarily, but I wonder if kids would like poke fun of each other if someone had like an Ace figure using Tidal Blast or Detonator, and they would be like, oh, you're poor because you cannot afford like to have the proper weapon system. And I don't know if kids bullied each other like saying that, oh, Ace cannot use that weapon system, you cannot play with us. I'm just drifting.
I have no idea. If you were a kid who actually played with Centurions figures and you have any memories along those lines, please contact us. But let's get to Tidal Blast. This was Max's intermediate system. It allowed him to fight Doc Terror both above and below the water. It made full use of the Centurions toy's mechanical motions. The lung-shaped oxygen units pulsated, the repulsor cannon and sonic thruster rotated, and the two shark missiles launched in any direction from missile pods that swiveled 360 degrees. Now, that was a pretty great feature. Now, the cartoon always had Max firing them forward, but say if you wanted to fire them backward, you could do that. If you wanted to fire one forward and the other backward, or one up and the other down, you could do that. It was a really great design.
Right, and you're absolutely right. And the fact that it had two missile launchers made it really great, and combined with, like you mentioned, that rebreather type or that lung type mechanism in the front piece, which as you rotated the inner shaft, it simulated breathing in and breathing out. It really made this one a really good example of a Centurions toy. It had the visuals, it had the mechanism, it has the spring-loaded guns. So it was really a good package, a really good weapon system.
Okay, and we haven't even gone over all the equipment yet. It also came with a harpoon, a target sensor, a non-working, unfortunately, grappling hook and cable winch, and 2 hydro-powered keel fins. So it actually gave you a lot of value for the money. It was one of my favorite systems for Max.
Mm-hmm, right, and so you had this. You purchased this in the store, or you acquired this later?
I bought all of these in the store because I got into Centurions just after the toy line had been canceled. So I was able to get everything in various local stores on clearance. I paid like $2-3 for all these assault weapon systems, and then I had to sell them, and now they're going for collector's prices on eBay and other sites, and I wish I still had them, but that's life.
Yeah, but that was a really great thing, and I'm sure it's a fantastic feeling to remember. It's like, just walking into a store and buying these toys on clearance. And let me add to what you said. Yes, the figure came with a hook and winch and kind of like harpoon gun, these naval type equipment, and unfortunately, of course, they were not shooting, but they really accentuated the kind of like the naval aspect of the figure with the hook and winch, to kind of grab and drag in the water items, and so and the harpoon gun really added to that Captain Ahab type image. Anything else about the Title Blast, or should we move on to Depth Charger?
Well, I had something else about Cruiser, if you wanted to mention that. Maybe go back and edit it in, which is that the repulsor cannon actually had 3 holes in it so that you could actually put another weapon into that weapon. If you wanted to take like a little small gun or a radar unit or something and put it into the repulsor cannon, you could do that, which is really cool.
I'm curious how many of our listeners who have that weapon system might now go to their shelves and try it actually out. So it's a really cool thing. So
I remember I did.
You did? Oh. Where did you find out about it? Did you read it in the show Bible, or how did you?
No. I had all the toys, and I realized, hey, you can this thing has holes in it, so you can put another weapon into this weapon. So I figured, why not? That's obviously what the toy designers intended.
Oh, gotcha. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah, interchangeability really made these toys special. Okay, so now just because we're already at almost halftime and we only covered like 2 weapon systems, just to be
let's try to speed it up.
Speed it up. Let's move on to Depth Charger, the mini submarine.
Yes, it is described by Kenner as the ultimate in counter hydro technology, and the chest pack had a pretty neat feature in that it had 2 firing torpedoes, which could be fired either through the assault weapon system by spinning the periscope on top or by hitting buttons that were on the unit itself. And there was also this huge backpack that was basically turned into a mini sub, and there was a hydromine that fit into the back of this thing, and there were a couple buttons you could push on top of it to fire the hydromine. And get this, the torpedoes and the hydromine actually had identical stems, so you could fire them from each other's launchers. If you wanted to fire one of the torpedoes from the back, you could do that. If you wanted to fire one of the hydromines from the chest, you could do that. So just another great example of interchangeability.
Oh, wow. Now, I didn't know that. And now that I'm checking the wiki, I see that peg that I never noticed. So that's really awesome. I wonder how many, or if there was a kid out there who had access to two of these and actually put the two hydromines to the front of depth charger.
Well, actually, each depth charger only came with one hydromine, and they were too bulky to be fired together out of the launchers from the chest. But hey, you could at least fire one of them if you wanted.
Yeah, it's really cool. One interesting aspect about the Centurions and the toys is that it wasn't just one of those kids shows where even though the characters, like, I wasn't sure if it happened in G.I. Joe, but I remember a lot of shows where they had machine gun or submachine gun type guns, the characters, and they were shooting lasers, so there was infinite ammo, as opposed to here. Even though I love G.I. Joe and Transformers, here there was a visible indication of the available ammunition for a lot of these weapons. There was only one mine that Max had to play around with, and two torpedoes. So there was this interesting element of like, oh, you're only given a specific set of weapons, and of course, you could use the laser type weapons, but when it comes to the heavy artillery, so to say, you had like a Centurion had limited resources to play around with, so he had to be smart about how he used those tools.
Although I do remember one episode, I remember which one it was, where Max just had Crystal Kane send him one hydromine after another, so he create a whole circle of hydromines around this object in the ocean that he wanted to blow up.
And that's actually a really good example of the authors considering, okay, they are limited, but we're not going to just have hydromines appear from nothing
anyway,
behind him.
Let's handle depth charger's other weapons to sort of speed things up. Right. 2 movable pontoon thrusters, 2 aqua cannons, a rotating periscope, which you already mentioned, 2 directional aqua fins, and 2 aqua thruster fins, which are actually recycled from Tidal Blast, and the only example I can think of 2 Centurions weapons sharing parts, at least in the stuff that was actually made. Once again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I personally am done with Depth Charger, and we can move on to CBAT unless you wanted to do something else.
Mark, I just for the Jake and Ace fans out there, since we covered the basic assortment, the first season assortment of Max, let's discuss Jake and Ace, their basic weapon systems, and then come back to the second wave of weapon systems if we have time for them now. If not, wave 2 might be the next or a future episode, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I understand. We don't want to tire out people by making them listen too long. Okay. So, Jake Rockwell, Rugged Rand Operations Specialist. His basic system was called Fire Force. Nothing to do with the anime of the same name, which ran on Adult Swim Toonami not too long ago. But anyway, so Fire Force's big feature was it had this big launcher that attached to either Jake's back or a hole on the backpack, so he could fire it over his shoulder. And it had this big plasma missile that was very visually impressive and could really take out those Doom drones.
Like Mark said, the plasma shell that the plasma accelerator launched, which was actually more like a missile launcher, like a bazooka, Actually, for personally, one of my favorite weapon systems is Fire Force because it was just so like it was a cool boys weapon system. It's like kids liked bazookas, kids liked rapid firing chain gun type weapons, which the plasma repulsor on his chest worked out as. Even if you think about the opening segment. Jake's moment to shine there is when he's like his chest plasma repulsor kind of mows down some drones, and it was one of those like I think it's a really basic army type weapon system where a unit in the army might have regular guys with assault rifles, but there's always an anti-tank unit somewhere if needed who has explosives, and I think like one of the main features of Jake's weapon systems were the explosives because he was this army type guy. So this basically like Fire Force was special, I think, because it had this huge ass missile launcher, but it wasn't. It was still kind of the smallest weapon system in his arsenal. So it was really a good combination of a light weapon system with a big rocket launcher. Basically, I think the appeal of this weapon system was that the kids who saw it saw that even though it was the cheapest and the lightest weapon system, it was with its impressive missile launcher. It had a lot of cool attached to it, and the character, the way he used the chest cannon also, showed him to be like this really cool, kind of gunslinger type, if I may say, character. So yeah, that's my personal impression of Fire Force.
Well, Jake was intended as sort of a 21st century cowboy, so yeah, and we haven't even mentioned the twin-arm laser cannon and the radar sensor unit. Or the attack helmet, which was the official name for Jake's helmet, which came with this system.
Wow, cool. So the helmets had their individual names as well?
Yeah, someone in Kenner Marketing came up with those things.
Oh, wow. Do you know what Max's and Ace's weapon helmet name was?
Well, I already mentioned that Max's was the diving helmet, and Ace, well, that's, once again, it's getting ahead of ourselves, but it's called a flight helmet. And now you know, and yeah, that's the wrong toy line.
I'm sorry. I'm a huge mark for Fire Force. And Jake. So I know I might slow down our progress. Anything else you feel we should add to discussing Fire Force?
Well, just to say, I don't mind because Fire Force, I think, was probably the coolest of the three basic assault weapon systems of the first wave. But anyway, so are you ready to move on to the even cooler Wild Weasel?
Can't wait. And if we had any sponsors, I would totally put in a commercial here because it's, to make people wait for this exciting next weapon system. I'll just check. I'm looking at, there's this, I just want to mention this as a side note. One of my resources to prepare for today was a website by someone who called himself Duke Nostalgia. The website has since been inactive and is not around anymore, but I was able to find it on the Wayback Machine. And basically regarding Fire Force, he mentions that Fire Force was one of the most utilized assault weapon system in the cartoons, probably even more frequently appearing than Ace's Sky Knight. And now that you think about it, he might probably have used Fire Force more often than the other guys their small weapon systems. Do you have any memories about this?
Well, I can't blame him if he did. Like I said, it was pretty cool for a basic assault weapon system.
And speaking of cool, let's move on to Wild Weasel.
Yeah, this is basically Jake's motorcycle that he wore because it actually had wheels. It had two wheels, both of which were movable, and one of them could attach to either the backpack or in a standing position or the chest pack in prone position, so that Jake could wear it either way, which was really cool. Yeah, it gave you it made the weapon system very versatile, and It allowed Jake to crash through even the hardiest barriers while deflecting enemy fire thanks to this big shield he wore. And it also had a rotating target sensor that guided Jake right to the battleground, 2 laser blasters, a movable visor shield, which he could wear with or without the helmet, 2 footrests, and 2 stabilizer fins. So yeah, if you wanted to get Jake on wheels to battle Doc Terror's forces, Wild Weasel was the way to go.
And I think Wild Weasel also augmented this gimmick regarding Jake, that he was a cowboy. Fire Force, like you mentioned, because they wanted him to be a kind of like a gunslinger type, Wild West type, cowboy type guy. He had the gunslinger, assault weapon system, and he also had the, the kind of the lone rider, the horseback rider type, the motorcycle, essentially a modern version of that idea. And it's interesting that not only did it have dual modes, so it could be used as a motorcycle or as a wheeled weapons platform. It was also probably the closest to a drone that Doc Terror usually used, because if you remove kind of like Jake from the frame of the weapon system, it could, as a motorcycle, as a self-sufficient motorcycle, or as a two-wheeled platform, it could, very well, be automated, at least based on its looks, which I wouldn't say about many of the other weapon systems, but definitely it was probably one of the coolest and fun to play with weapon systems, and also one of those weapon systems where you needed kind of like all the elements to be present in your toy, otherwise it would tip, or you wouldn't be able to display it that well. So you needed those little side elements to keep it standing, but it was definitely one of the coolest weapon systems.
But yeah, I agree with it going with Jake's cowboy theme. He's a cowboy, and on a steel horse he rides.
And you can even picture Jake, riding in the desert, the American, I don't know what you call prairie. I'm not really familiar with American culture that much.
Yeah. Which is how he was pictured on the package art and in the catalog photos. By the way, that thing I said before, and you can cut this out part if you want, this part out if you want, that was a reference to the Bon Jovi song "Wanted Dead or Alive." And if you want to like put a little excerpt from it in there, that might be funny.
Right, you are. Yeah, I see what you mean. Although I don't know, was Bon Jovi around in '86?
I think so. I don't know if that particular song was around, but yeah. I mean, so I have no idea if the designers were thinking of that or not. I think the song was like from '89 or something. But the point is, the joke fits, in my opinion.
One thing, again, another footnote before we move on to either Hornet or Detonator. Probably Hornet, because it's when you look at the firepower, probably that Hornet comes next, and then Detonator. I think one of the cool things about the Centurions was that it basically dealt with a lot of American tropes, but tropes that were attractive both to American kids and understandable for international kids as well. Like, for example, I'm going to use the old expression cowboys and Indians. Now, of course, I know you would say cowboys and Native Americans, but the idea that Jake was this visibly, understandably cowboy type guy for a European kid, a British kid, a Hungarian kid, an American kid, and there was, for example, John Thunder, whose weapon systems we're going to go over later, who was a visibly, you looked at him and you didn't need any explanation on who he was, or what his background was. That's why I think this show was so cool, because everyone immediately looked at them and it was visible either by their outfit or by how they thought that they represented a very popular trope. So I think one thing that they nailed with Jake is that he kind of oozed that lone gunslinger or that Wild West type guy. But anyways, let's move on to the next weapon system, which would be which is Hornet, yeah.
Which is Hornet, but not before I mentioned that in this show the cowboy and the Indian were on the same side,
which was very progressive. Let's put it this way, and I think it's a good thing that none of them were antagonized. The quote unquote Indian wasn't the evil character, and the cowboy wasn't demonized as like something toxic or anything. He was like, oh, cowboy, good guy, cowboy native fights along with the Native American who's also a good guy, and the bad guy is a half robot, and there's nothing immoral about demonizing evil robots. So it worked well in so many franchises. So yeah, let's go on to Hornet.
Okay, Hornet. I don't know how well it fits into the cowboy theme, but Jake got something outside especially because this isn't basically an air assault weapon system. It was a mini helicopter, and there was this action button that he pressed that made the helicopter blades on the backpack spin, and there was also a chest-mounted freeze ray cannon, 2 sonic thrusters, 2 high-frequency target sensors, 4 Sidewinder missiles. I guess that name does fit in with the cowboy thing. An opening canopy, a laser gun, and 2 landing skids.
Interestingly enough, I just had this idea and Googled it. I think cowboys actually started using helicopters. I don't know if in the 80s, but they have been using helicopters. So I'm sure it wasn't that wasn't the reference that they based this system on, but if you really want to force a meaning into helicopter and cowboy, I think there's something out on Google that you can use. So definitely, and of course you have to address the elephant in the room. Hornet is an aerial weapon system, and it would, I don't know if it would totally fit Ace's kind of wild and reckless flyboy gimmick, but because it's too slow for such a daredevil character. But I don't know. What's your take? Why do you think they gave a helicopter to Jake, even though ground was the most the most typical place where they fought?
Well, maybe because it wasn't really intended to go as high in the atmosphere as Ace's weapon systems. It was probably meant to be more of a low to the ground type thing. And I remember that Jake used it to rescue Ace in Zone Dancer, so you got to give him his props for that. But anyway, so otherwise I don't know why they would give the helicopter to Jake, but if you notice, he had more assault weapon systems than the other characters. He had 6, Max had 5, Ace had 4, and then John and Rex had 2 each. Now, obviously that would have changed if the line had continued, but that's as many as we had until Kenner canceled the line.
Reading Duke Nostalgia's Centurions page, he mentions that Jake was everyone's favorite Centurion, and I think not only was that organic, that a lot of people resonated with Jake, and he just seemed like a not boastful but like a cool natural character, but also it was probably, I think, toy designers also intended him to be a popular guy, and that's why he got so many weapon systems. But also, I think they built on the fact that, okay, when you look at G.I. Joe or some of these other franchises, most of the characters are ground based. So, okay, we look at the submarine guy, and if you really put it on the scale, maybe they were thinking that, the submarine guy might be kind of niche, like, like Jacques Cousteau. Some people, are interested in underwater exploration. A lot of kids might not be. With Ace, a lot of people, of course, like planes, but maybe, when you compare, Ace as in like, okay, small plane, medium-sized plane, and and orbital or like outer space plane, they're kind of plane. So there was not that much variety. So I think they thought that the reason Jake could be one of the focal or one of the most popular, if not most popular character, is that there's more variety, more types of armaments, more types of weapon systems that they could play around with on the ground, as opposed to what you're forced to be with, like with Max. It's like small submarine, medium submarine, deep sea submarine. That's my theory. Why do you think he was both designed to be and perceived as one of the favorites?
Well, you make a good point there in that, most people live on the ground. We don't live in the sky or in the sea, at least not in the real world. In the future world of Centurions, there are people who live there. But yeah, so the ground is the area that most people are used to, and so it offers you the most opportunity for assault weapon systems. Although, look at it this way. You couldn't play with Jake's weapon systems in the bathtub or in the swimming pool.
That's very true. Although I don't know if anyone did and what their figure's current state is, but
I do remember the Kenner catalog saying that Max's toys were designed so that they could be played with underwater.
Interesting. Now I'm curious whether the other toys would be also waterproof.
If the Kenner designs were smart, they could. After all, we saw Ace using orbital interceptor underwater a couple times, but once again, we get ahead of ourselves.
Right. So before we go into the far reaches of our creativity and ponder whether Hornet could be used as a water ski, and then, if he would turn his propeller and you would attach it to its back, it would be basically a self-propelled water ski and steal the spotlight from Max.
Well, Max would have had a system like that in the second year called Fathom Fan, but anyway, we're running out of time, and we got to talk about Detonator.
Before we go on, I want to mention that we did a poll on the Centurions Facebook page, and a huge number of people compared to all the other choices voted for Detonator as the most popular or their favorite weapon system. I'm just going to give you the first 5 choices. Detonator, 10 people. Tidal Blast, 5 people. Hornet, 3 people. Swing Shot, 3 people. Wild Weasel, 2. And there was 1 Sky Knight, 1 Seabat, and 1 Silent Arrow. So apparently, Detonator is the favorite for a major part of the fandom.
Wait, Ace only gets 1 in the top 10?
Yes, he basically
Seriously?
Ace had 1 single Sky Knight vote, and this was not character but weapon system. So yeah, it's like Ace got as many votes as John Thunder with his Silent Arrow. So yeah, apparently if you look at weapon systems, Detonator really was the explosive factor in the show.
Well, sorry, Flyboy. Looks like you're grounded. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, you can't deny how cool Detonator is. Kenner called it heavy artillery designed for missions requiring maximum firepower, and yeah, it was the truth. This thing was a massive hunk of plastic. Now, it had a chest pack featuring 2 reciprocating freeze ray blasters, which was cool enough in itself. There was also detachable shields that fit onto the blasters, plus a sonic screen that helped him target the blasters. Then you got this huge backpack that has pivoting, rotating sonic ray guns on the top, which also have a detachable rangefinder, plus 2 launching splacer missiles, and 2 leg-mounted stabilizers whose struts attached to the backpack, allowing Jake to tilt upwards and mount ground-to-air attacks on Terror's forces. When Jake says he'll bend over backwards to beat Doc Terror, he means it.
Was this in the Bible?
No, that's just stuff I wrote for my article. because I'm brilliant.
You are, and that's why I'm happy that you're on the show.
And modest. Yeah. As Bullwinkle once said, when it comes to humility, I'm the greatest.
See? Well, I'm not going to stop and argue with you. So now we have probably around 10 minutes left. So unfortunately, and I apologize for just being too wordy with our description and our memories of the weapon systems, but probably we'll wrap with detonator now, and we'll.
Oh wait, you don't want to even try for Ace's systems?
If you feel like, we can try for it.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry we're taking so long with these, but we're having too much fun. But anyway, Ace McCloud, daring air operations expert. He's got an ego, but like the old saying goes, it ain't boasting if you can back it up, and Ace can back it up. He is the king of the skies, especially when he's wearing Sky Knight, which is his basic assault weapon system, which includes a flight helmet, a rotating cannon pod with 2 detachable laser cannons, a laser bomb, a rotating dual laser sensor. I guess Ace really likes lasers. And 2 stencil missiles. Now, I have no idea what stencil missiles are in the real world. I'm sure it's not just some word that a Kenner person came up with. If you know what they are, please contact us. And also 2 turbo thrusters and a flight pack with swing wings that move in and out. So yeah, Sky Knight was the only one of the basic assault weapon systems that didn't come with a missile launcher, but did it need one?
Yeah, and I think he even he was very beam based, at least when it comes to this weapon system. And I think this was the one in the intro even that he had that little aerial maneuver where he destroyed some drones as well before we punched to the Centurions logo, wasn't he?
Yeah, the title sequence featured mostly, if not exclusively, the 3 basic systems. One weapon system not featured in the opening was Orbital Interceptor, which was Ace's system for outer atmospheric activities and secret surveillance missions. Its two largest components, are the front-mounted chest thruster pack and backpack re-entry vehicle. The backpack carries a powerful multi-particle missile that can be fired by rotating the outer atmospheric target sensor, which also pivots, and or the radar homing device. 2 inner atmospheric thrusters, 2 particle beam defensors, and a life support helmet complete the system. So yeah, this is where Ace gets his special helmet, because sometimes he uses this in the outer atmosphere where there's little to no oxygen, so he needs it. And one neat feature I have noticed about this system that hasn't been remarked on much is that with the chest unit, you could fit in either the target sensor or the radar homing device, but it also had 3 spinning holes on it so that you could put in the particle beam defensors and spin them both around at the same time. So that was pretty cool and showed a lot of forethought on the part of Kenner's designers.
Right. And it's interesting, that in the cartoons and everywhere, pictured in drawings and comic books, the helmet had a clear visor. So essentially, or at least he could look through, and the toy had just gold painted over, and no actual see-through visor.
Well, yeah, Kenner probably didn't want to spend the money it would cost to make a clear visor, so it's possible that they only showed Ace's face showing through the the helmet so that you could see his facial expressions. And also, come on, Ace is a handsome guy. He wants his face visible at all times. Anyway, we're probably going to have to save the rest of the assault weapon systems, the second year stuff, for next time. But we still got enough time to cover Skybolt, which is Ace's heavy assault weapon system, which, as the Kenner catalog says, gives him massive air reinforcement against any enemy. Okay, so you get, basically, he's wearing a fighter plane. You get this back thruster unit, which is actually taller than any of the Centurions figures. I mean, the back of it goes over Ace's head. It's powered by a rotating turbine and jet fan, a rotating infrared sensor, and pulsating anti-radar deflector attached to the chest unit. And the anti-radar deflector was also used in the toy line to give Ace temporary invisibility powers. Skybolt's other equipment consists of 2 radar tracking wings, 2 modular invertible wings, which means that they could attach to him either right side up or upside down, whichever way you wanted, 2 leg-mounted booster stabilizer pods, 2 launching heat-seeking missiles, and 2 non-launching galactic missiles. And another neat thing I noticed about the 2 radar tracking wings is that if you put them on the top of the system over Ace's head, they fit perfectly with the shape. Although, of course, you could also put them elsewhere on the system, and they worked there too.
Yeah, and so this was basically a gunship. This was the heavy artillery that was, combined with his airborne gimmick, and essentially his equivalent, so to say, to detonator. So it's interesting how
depth charger
that's what I was about to say. That depth charger had 2 torpedoes and the mine. This one had tons of missiles and detonator, who I think we spent not enough time discussing, so we might go back for a few minutes. I think detonator had the freeze ray and the splicer missiles. So definitely they really wanted to have this massive flagship toy for each of the characters, and this one ended up being Sky Knight Skybolt for Ace, and I'm just curious, like, because of the small pieces, how many complete Skybolts there are out there, because I if I remember correctly, I haven't seen too many complete versions of this toy. So many small parts, so many missiles. It might be one of those difficult to collect figures from the main line.
Yeah, that's why when I got my toys, I made sure to put all the parts inside the box. I don't think I ever lost anything.
Right, but since we were discussing children's toys, I think a lot of parents or former children who wanna sell them would lose probably a lot on their values of these toys, because they just weren't careful enough to store them in a box like you did.
Yeah, but I was already an adult when I bought these things, because I am a pathetic case of arrested development.
This is really trendy nowadays, so you're just one of the flock. Absolutely, that and there's nothing negative about that. As I sometimes tell my parents, I could have spent that money on drugs or alcohol, but I'm sorry, my body doesn't need any chemical. It needs these figures on my shelf. So that's a way smarter investment of your money. And if you want to sell it, it's and even Mark has mentioned a couple of times that these figures are now catching an exorbitant amount of money. Just to mention, when I think I got my my 2 recent purchases, which were Seabat and which one was my most recent one? I think it was
Slingshot.
Slingshot, thank you. Yeah, they were each like around $250 or something, and so I don't know how far these are going to climb, but see if there are people out there who buy this, I don't understand why Hasbro wouldn't have an incentive to revive the show, because the toys survived the test of time, so to say.
Well, as we talked about last time, the rights situation is kind of complicated. Maybe Hasbro thinks they can't make enough money off this franchise to justify bringing it back. Who knows? We'd have to talk to the lawyers. But the point is, yeah, toys, they are not as dangerous for you as drugs, but they are equally addictive and equally expensive.
Unfortunately, yes, and but it's something that that we're stuck with. So there's no reason to wonder about the whys. But I agree. One thing I wanted to still discuss, and we're probably around the last probably 5 minutes of the show. We'll see how short it will become in the edit. Is that just going back to the poll that we had? So detonator, of course, was number one. I assume probably because how much it was like a mobile artillery, and how much material there was in the toy. It was just like massive, and it was the ultimate firepower. And it's interesting how right up after that comes let me check, comes Tidal Blast. So after 10 detonator votes, we get 5 Tidal Blast votes, even though Tidal Blast was the medium size weapon system for Max. And when I look at the two toys, Tidal Blast had 2 huge missiles, and Detonator had 2 huge missiles. So maybe people are really attracted to these spring-loaded guns. I myself remember collecting specifically spring-loaded weaponry with GI Joes. So and Hornet as a third choice, maybe because it was so exotic. So like a mix between Ace's and Jake's choice. What do you think of the top threes? Detonator, Tidal Blast, and then Hornet.
Well, message to Hasbro or whoever does a toy line similar to Centurions. More missiles.
Indeed, and we don't even have any limitations that maybe the 80s and 90s had with non-firing or limited power spring-loaded toys, because nowadays you can basically sell anything. So yeah, absolutely more spring-loaded toys. I'm just looking at this poll, and it's like Swig Shot, and Seabat. Swing Shot got 3 votes. Seabat got 1 vote. Silent Arrow got 1 vote. So there are people out there who kind of fancy the difficult to purchase, the difficult to access toys.
It's interesting that Silent Arrow got any votes, considering that it's one of the unproduced toys that hardly anybody has unless they were lucky enough to find a prototype. But I guess we will leave all that stuff, all the unproduced toys, all the second wave toys that did come out until our next episode.
Exactly. So before we say goodbye to you guys for this week, thank you so much for listening and for participating, either by liking our Facebook page or commenting, giving supportive and friendly feedback on our Facebook group page. And please tune in next time when we're going to continue discussing the weapon systems. We'll probably spend the next episode just discussing that, because there are the prototypes that are still coming up, that the unproduced ones. I'm sure Mark has some notes in the Bible regarding some unproduced toys. There are those wall climber toys that we don't even know which Centurions would have been assigned to. So there's a lot of ground to cover.
Plus the mysterious Vic McLeod, the 6th Centurion. We don't even know what his weapon systems are going to be called. But anyway, we will bring you that all next time on Man and Machine Podcast Extreme!